Nairobi, Kenya. Zawadi Muriuki stood outside the high court with her hands shaking, even though she kept her chin lifted like a woman refusing to break. Cameras flashed around her, reporters whispered her name, but all she could feel was the heavy stare of the man she once trusted with her whole life, her husband, Kamau Njenga. The same man who used to hold her hand during late-night market runs, who once told her, "Your dreams are my dreams too." Today, he looked at her like she was an enemy. As she waited for the hearing to begin, Zawadi softly told the journalists the truth of how her journey began. She spoke about selling handmade pieces at small street stalls in Mombasa, saving every coin she could, dreaming of building something beautiful, something that carried the heartbeat of African culture. Over the years, that tiny dream grew into Zawadi Culture, a fashion brand worth millions, worn by celebrities and loved across Kenya. She built it with her own sweat, long nights, and endless sacrifices. But the moment she mentioned Kamau's betrayal, her voice tightened. She explained how he went behind her back, filed legal papers claiming her entire business, and confidently declared that a wife's property is automatically her husband. Zawadi still couldn't understand how the man she lifted, supported, and trusted turned around and tried to erase her from everything she built. Standing outside the court, she looked heartbroken yet fierce. The air felt heavy, like a storm was about to break, a storm that would reveal truths no one saw coming. Zawadi's story truly began years earlier in Mombasa, long before lawyers, courtrooms, and betrayal. Back then, she was just a young woman with a tiny wooden stall near the beach, selling colorful handmade pieces stitched from African fabrics she bought from local markets. Tourists loved her bright kitenge designs, and even locals stopped by to admire the way she mixed culture with modern style. She didn't have much money, but she had passion, creativity, and a stubborn kind of hope that kept her going even when days were slow. Every morning, she woke up before sunrise, carried her bags to the beach, and set up her stall. Some days she made only enough to buy dinner. Other days, she felt like she was finally being seen. She kept a small notebook where she wrote every customer's feedback, every idea, every dream. Slowly, her reputation grew. People started saying, "Go to that lady with the bright smile and brighter fabrics." That woman was Zawadi. One evening, when she was packing up her stall, a man stopped to help her pick up a bundle of fabric that had fallen. He had a gentle smile and introduced himself as Kamau Njenga, an accountant from Nakuru who had recently moved to Mombasa for work. Zawadi laughed, saying she didn't need help, but he insisted anyway. That small moment turned into a conversation, then coffee, then late-night chats. Soon, they became inseparable. Kamau was charming, thoughtful, and seemed to admire her drive. He loved listening to her business ideas and often encouraged her to dream even bigger. He told her she was meant for more than a stall, and for a while, she believed he was her perfect partner. They talked about building something together, a future, a family, maybe even a business empire. It felt like a love story written in the sun and salt of Mombasa. With Kamau by her side, Zawadi pushed harder. She started traveling to small towns to source unique fabric. Sometimes she took overnight buses, returning home exhausted but excited. She designed new patterns, hired 2 young assistants, and expanded to a small shop near the tourist district. Her brand, later named Zawadi Culture, started attracting influencers, returning customers, and even fashion bloggers. She often worked until midnight, sewing, planning, and dreaming. Kamau watched her brand grow and offered to handle the accounts since he was good with numbers. Zawadi felt relieved. Finally, someone she trusted who could help her manage finances while she focused on designing. He introduced her to business registration processes, helped her open company accounts, and assured her he would protect her interests. She didn't question him. She didn't worry. She believed in him the way she believed in her own hard work. Trusting Kamau felt natural back then. She didn't know that the same trust, the same open-hearted love, would one day become the very thing that almost destroyed everything she built. For a while, everything between Zawadi and Kamau looked perfect from the outside. They lived in a cozy apartment in Nairobi, shared meals, laughed together, and talked about expanding Zawadi Culture into a national brand. But the moment Zawadi's business started making real money, the kind that attracted media attention and big clients, something in Kamau began to change. It started slowly, a small comment here and there. When Zawadi excitedly showed him a magazine feature about her brand, he simply said, "Don't let it get to your head." When she told him about new clients from South Africa, he replied, "You're becoming too ambitious for your own good." These weren't jokes. The tone wasn't playful. It felt like he was shrinking in her light instead of celebrating it. Then the real problems began. Suppliers started calling her directly, complaining they hadn't been paid on time. Zawadi was confused. Kamau was the one handling the payments. When she asked him about it, he'd smile and say, "Relax, babe. I've already handled it." But the calls didn't stop. Some employees also told her privately that Kamau had been rude, dismissive, or intentionally delaying things they needed to work. One of her best tailors even quit after Kamau accused him of mismanaging materials without proof. Zawadi tried to talk to Kamau gently, but he always twisted the conversation, saying people were jealous of him or trying to come between them. One night, while checking her accounts, Zawadi noticed something strange. A few receipts were missing. Some payments didn't match what she remembered approving. A large amount of money had been withdrawn in cash. But every time she questioned Kamau, he claimed she was being paranoid and overworked. "You don't trust me anymore?" he'd ask, acting. Instead of arguing, she would apologize and promise to rest more. She didn't want to fight. Meanwhile, Kamau started changing his lifestyle. He bought expensive shoes, a new watch, and even upgraded his phone without telling her. Zawadi found the new items strange because they weren't planning any big purchases. When she asked where the money came from, he laughed and said he had side investments. But something about the way he avoided eye contact made her uneasy. Zawadi knew something was wrong, but she silenced herself. Part of her didn't want to believe her own husband could betray her. Another part feared society's judgment, the whispers that she was failing in her marriage, that she was too successful, that she was too loud for a wife. She told herself to keep the peace, to avoid drama, to trust her man. Her mother, Mama Thandai, saw through everything. One afternoon, she sat Zawadi down, looked her straight in the eyes, and said, "My daughter, listen to me. A man who feels threatened by a woman's strength can become dangerous. Be careful." Zawadi nodded, but her heart refused to accept that warning fully. She didn't know it yet, but the cracks in her marriage were about to explode, in ways she could never have imagined. That morning started like any other. Zawadi woke up early, made herself tea, and drove to her office humming softly to the radio. She had a meeting with a new international buyer, and her mind was full of ideas and excitement. But the moment she turned the corner to her building, her heart dropped. A crowd of confused employees stood outside. Police officers were positioned at the entrance, and the office door, her office door, had a brand new lock. For a second, Zawadi thought there had been a break-in. She rushed forward, but one of the officers stepped in front of her. "Sorry, madam, you are not allowed to enter." Her breath caught. "What do you mean? This is my company. I'm the owner." The officer checked his clipboard and shook his head. "According to the documents we received, the owner is Mr. Kamau Njenga." Zawadi felt the ground tilt beneath her. Employees stared at her with wide, frightened eyes. Some whispered. Some looked ready to cry. Her assistant, Asha, ran to her and said, "Madam, they came early. They said everything belongs to your husband now." Everything moved in slow motion after that. Zawadi demanded to see the document. The officer showed her copies of government records, all updated, all stamped, all showing Kamau as the sole owner. Her name had been completely removed. Even worse, the signatures looked like hers. But she knew instantly they were forged. Her phone buzzed nonstop. Bank alerts, notifications, messages from suppliers. When she checked, every account linked to the business had been frozen. Payments had been stopped. Orders held. Her financial access was gone, wiped out overnight. Employees started panicking. One man said suppliers were demanding answers. Another said social media was already spinning wild stories. Hashtags like #ZawadiCultureScandal and #OwnerReplaced were spreading fast. Influencers were asking what happened. Competitors were gossiping. It was chaos. And then, like a scene from a nightmare, Kamau appeared. He walked out of a parked SUV wearing sunglasses and a smug smile, waving at the officers like he owned the world. When his eyes met hers, he didn't look guilty. He didn't look sorry. He looked proud. Zawadi whispered, "Kamau, what have you done?" He stepped close enough for only her to hear and said quietly but without mercy, "This is what happens when a wife forgets her place." Her chest tightened. Anger, confusion, betrayal. Everything hit her all at once. She tried to speak, but her voice wouldn't come out. Kamau gave one last smirk before walking past her and entering the office that she had built from nothing. Employees watched her helplessly, waiting for her to explain, to fix everything. But Zawadi felt frozen. Her world, her marriage, her business, everything she had poured her life into, had just been stolen in broad daylight. And she didn't even know the full extent of the betrayal yet. For days after the takeover, Zawadi felt like she was living inside a dark cloud. Everything she loved had been ripped away in a single morning. Her business was gone, her reputation was being dragged online, and her own husband had become the enemy she never saw coming. Reporters chased her with questions. Clients backed away, confused by the chaos. Even close friends didn't know what to say. Zawadi felt herself shrinking, losing pieces of who she was. She couldn't stay in Nairobi anymore. Everywhere she looked reminded her of what she had built and what had been stolen. So she packed a small suitcase, turned off her phone, and took the bus to Kisumu. It was the longest, quietest journey of her life. She sat by the window, watching the passing villages and thinking, how did I lose everything so fast? By the time she arrived at her aunt's home, she felt empty. Auntie Wairamu, her mother's older sister, welcomed her with open arms. She was a retired lawyer, respected across the region, known for her sharp mind and even sharper tongue. The moment she saw Zawadi's dull eyes and tired face, she didn't ask many questions. She just hugged her and whispered, "Rest, my child. The world can wait." Days passed. Zawadi barely spoke. Some nights she cried silently. Some mornings she didn't get out of bed. The pain was deep, not just because of the business, but because the man she trusted with her whole heart had treated her like she was nothing. Betrayal from a stranger hurts, but betrayal from someone you slept beside, someone you believed in, that wound cuts deeper. One evening, as the sun set behind Lake Victoria, Auntie Wairamu sat beside Zawadi on the balcony. She placed a warm cup of tea in her hands and said, "I've been patient. I've let you grieve, but now you must listen." Zawadi looked at her, eyes swollen. "You built an empire from your bare hands," her aunt continued. "No man gave it to you. No man made you. And no man has the right to take it from you." Tears rolled down Zawadi's cheeks. "Auntie, I don't even know where to start. He took everything." Auntie Wairamu shook her head. "He took what was visible. But the real strength, the real power, that's still in you." She leaned closer. "And I am not just your aunt. I am a lawyer. I know the law. And I know when someone has committed crimes." Zawadi sat up a little straighter. "You are not going to hide here forever," her aunt said firmly. "You're going to stand up. You're going to fight. And you're going to take back what is yours. You hear me?" Zawadi wiped her tears. For the first time since everything collapsed, she felt a spark, tiny, trembling, but alive. Her aunt smiled softly. "Good. Because this battle, it's just beginning." In that moment, Zawadi felt her strength returning piece by piece. The pain was still there, but now it was fueling something new, determination. She wasn't done. Her story wasn't over. And she was ready to rise again. Once Zawadi found her strength again, something inside her clicked. She wasn't the same broken woman who had arrived in Kisumu. She was quiet, focused, and ready to understand exactly how Kamau had destroyed her life. And with Auntie Wairamu beside her, the investigation began. Auntie Wairamu made a few phone calls, calling in favors from former colleagues, senior lawyers, retired judges, and even a former registrar officer. Within days, they had access to information Zawadi could never have reached alone. They gathered around the dining table every evening, spreading documents, analyzing records, and connecting dots that were meant to stay hidden. The first shock came when they looked at the business registration file. Her signature had been forged, not once, but multiple times. Whoever did it had practiced copying her handwriting until it looked almost perfect. Her name had been removed, Kamau's inserted, and the changes approved by a government official who clearly didn't follow proper procedure. That official was bribed, Auntie Wairamu said without hesitation. Nobody processes such big changes overnight without a gift under the table. Zawadi felt anger rising in her chest. "So he planned this for months." "No, Zawadi," her aunt corrected gently. "He planned this for years." The more they dug, the more the truth spilled out. Company accounts had been manipulated long before the takeover. Money quietly moved into secret accounts. Payments made to unknown vendors. Cash withdrawals done at odd hours. Some accounts only Kamau had access to. It was all there, hidden in plain sight, covered by her trust in him. But the biggest breakthrough came from someone unexpected. One evening, Zawadi's email pinged with a message from a name she recognized. Musa Odinga, one of her loyal employees who had worked with her for 5 years. The email was short. "Madam, I have information that can help you. Please don't tell anyone. It's dangerous." Auntie Wairamu arranged a private meeting in a quiet Kisumu cafe. Musa arrived with a hoodie pulled over his head, looking around nervously before sitting down. "Madam Zawadi," he whispered, "I'm risking my job, maybe even my safety, but I can't let him get away with what he did." He slid a small USB drive across the table. Inside it were explosive files, video recordings from office CCTV, files Kamau thought he had deleted. Musa had saved the originals knowing something was wrong. One video showed Kamau laughing with 2 of her senior staff, bragging, "I'm just taking what is rightfully mine. She built the brand, yes, but I helped her. So technically it's ours, or rather mine." Another clip showed him making phone calls, talking about clearing obstacles, moving money, and making sure she can't claim anything. There were audio recordings, screenshots of shady transactions, and emails proving he had planned everything carefully. Zawadi's stomach twisted as she watched. It was betrayal in its purest form, cold, calculated, and intentional. Still, she didn't cry. She didn't scream. She didn't even talk much. She just gathered every document, every screenshot, every recording, and stored it safely. Auntie Wairamu watched her silently, impressed. "You're stronger than I expected," she said. Zawadi looked up, her eyes steady. "I'm not done," she whispered. Not until the truth comes out. She wasn't rushing. She wasn't reacting emotionally. She was preparing, slowly, quietly, for the kind of courtroom comeback that would shake the whole of Nairobi. The morning of the hearing, Nairobi High Court looked like a war zone disguised as a building. Journalists rushed around with cameras, people whispered in hallways, and social media influencers lined up outside the entrance waiting for drama. And they got it. Kamau arrived first, stepping out of a shiny black car like he was a celebrity. He wore a designer suit, dark glasses, and a confident smile that screamed, "I've already won." Two expensive lawyers walked beside him, carrying thick files and acting like they were handling Kenya's biggest case. Kamau waved to reporters, even joked with them, pretending he was the victim in all of this. Then Zawadi entered. No expensive outfit, no dramatic entrance, just quiet confidence. She walked beside Auntie Wairamu, who looked like a woman ready to set the entire courtroom on fire if needed. People moved aside when she passed, not because they knew her, but because her presence demanded respect. Inside the courtroom, Kamau's lawyers started strong. They tried to spin a ridiculous story, claiming Kamau was the true brains behind Zawadi culture. They said he guided the business, invested his own money, and protected Zawadi from financial mistakes. At one point, Kamau even pretended to wipe a fake tear, saying he was deeply hurt by her mistrust. Then came the insult that made the whole courtroom gasp. He called Zawadi emotionally unstable and said she was not mentally fit to run a company. Zawadi sat still, but Auntie Wairamu's eyebrow lifted, and that was the moment everyone realized the game was about to flip. When cross-examination began, the real war started. Auntie Wairamu rose slowly, walked to the center of the room, and smiled politely, the kind of smile that makes a liar nervous. Then she began her attack. First, she presented receipts, hundreds of them, all showing Zawadi paid for business materials long before Kamau was even part of her life. She held up old photos, emails between Zawadi and suppliers, and registration documents showing Zawadi as the founder from day one. Kamau's confident smile twitched. Next came the bank transfers, proof of money Kamau had secretly moved from the company to his personal accounts. Auntie Wairamu read the dates aloud one by one, asking him each time, "Do you deny this?" Kamau's lawyers puffed up their chests, tried to object, but the judge silenced. Then came the CCTV footage. Video clips played on the courtroom screen, showing Kamau bragging, boasting, laughing about taking control. His own voice echoed across the room as he said, "She'll never see it coming." The courtroom erupted into shocked whispers. Kamau started sweating. His lawyers began whispering urgently, flipping through papers, completely thrown off. And then the final blow, Moose's anonymous testimony. Audio recordings of him explaining how Kamau forged signatures, bribed officials, and manipulated accounts. Every word tightened the noose around Kamau's lies. By the time Auntie Wairamu finished, Kamau's confidence had shattered. He looked small, lost, cornered. His lawyers had stopped whispering. They were now panicking. The judge leaned back, expression unreadable, tension so thick the room felt breathless. Everyone knew it. The war wasn't just turning. It was about to explode. The courtroom was already tense, but no one knew that the real explosion hadn't even started yet. After hours of presenting receipts, emails, bank statements, and CCTV footage, most people in the room were convinced Kamau was done for. Even his lawyers looked shaky. But Auntie Wairamu wasn't finished. She stepped forward again, holding a slim brown envelope in her hand, calm, steady, in total control. "Your Honor," she said, her voice smooth but sharp, "I have one final piece of evidence." Kamau's head snapped up. His lawyers leaned closer, whispering urgently. Zawadi sat quietly, hands folded in her lap, but her eyes were fixed on her aunt. Auntie Wairamu opened the envelope slowly, dramatically, like she was unwrapping the final blow in a heavyweight fight. The entire courtroom leaned forward. Inside was a single document, not thick, not flashy, but powerful enough to destroy everything Kamau had planned. She held it up, letting everyone see the signature at the bottom. "This," she said, "is a legally notarized premarital agreement signed by Ms. Zawadi Muriuki and her former accountant 7 years ago, before her marriage to Mr. Njenga." Kamau frowned, confused for a second, then stiffened. Auntie Wairamu continued, "This agreement clearly states that Zawadi culture, past, present, and future, is the sole property of Ms. Muriuki. No spouse, partner, or future husband will have any legal claim to it. Not now. Not ever." A wave of gasps crashed through the courtroom. Cameras clicked. Someone whispered, "Hayea," under their breath. Even the judge's eyebrows lifted, but all eyes turned to Kamau. At first he froze. Then his face drained of every drop of color. It was like watching a man realize he had just dug his own grave. His lips trembled. His eyes blinked rapidly. His hands shook as he grabbed his lawyer's arm. "What is that?" he hissed. "That can't be real," She never told me. His lawyer looked at the document, and his face fell too. He knew. He understood. He saw the trap. Because this one document changed everything. Every forged signature? Now officially a crime. Every bank withdrawal? Now theft from a company he had zero legal rights to. Every bribe? Now evidence of intentional fraud against an entity he did not, and could never, own. Kamau tried to stand, maybe to object, maybe to shout, but his knees wobbled and he slumped back into his seat. Sweat rolled down his temples. He looked like a man who had just seen his entire future collapse in front of him. The judge examined the document carefully, flipping through the pages. When he looked up, his voice was calm but deadly. "Mr. Njenga," he said, "this agreement is signed, dated, notarized, and legally binding. It holds full authority, which means any claim you made over Zawadi culture was invalid from the start." The courtroom erupted again, louder this time. Kamau stared at Zawadi as if seeing her for the first time. But she didn't look back. She didn't need to. For years, he thought she was naive. For months, he thought he had outsmarted her. For weeks, he believed he had won. But the moment that document hit the light, Kamau finally realized the truth. He had never understood the woman he betrayed. And now, there was no escape. The man who tried to steal everything was watching his world crumble, piece by piece, as the woman he underestimated rose higher than ever. The courtroom felt painfully silent when the judge finally returned with the written decision in his hand. Every step he took echoed like a drum in Zawadi's chest. She kept her hands tightly folded, trying to steady her breathing. Across the room, Kamau sat with his lawyers, pretending to look calm, but his foot tapped nonstop under the table. For the first time since the fight began, he looked unsure of himself. When the judge spoke, his voice was steady and firm. He explained that after reviewing all evidence, the forged documents, the stolen funds, the manipulated accounts, the bribed officials, the hidden recordings, the fraudulent registration changes, and finally the premarital document, the truth was undeniable. The company had always been Zawadi's. Every signature Kamau used was illegal. Every financial move he made behind her back was a crime. Every lie he told in court had just dug his own grave deeper. Then the judge read the final ruling. All claims made by Mr. Kamau Murayuki are dismissed. Full ownership of the company is returned to Ms. Zawadi Akie. Additionally, Mr. Murayuki will face criminal charges for forgery, fraud, and attempted theft. For a moment, Kamau didn't move. It was like his mind froze. His face went blank, his mouth slightly open, and the room watched the exact second reality punched him. His lawyers dropped their heads. One of them quietly shut his laptop, already planning to abandon the sinking ship. Cameras immediately clicked from the press benches. Reporters whispered, scribbling in their notebooks. The courtroom buzzed with excitement as officers stepped forward. When they placed a hand on Kamau's shoulder, he jerked back in shock, as if he still believed he could talk his way out. But there was no escape now. The same arrogance he used to humiliate Zawadi had brought him exactly where he stood, exposed, guilty, and defeated. As he was escorted out, someone in the crowd muttered, "That's what greed does." Another whispered, "He thought she was weak." A third person said loudly, "Look at the lioness. She fought and won." Zawadi remained seated, tears gathering in her eyes, not tears of sadness, but deep relief and strength. Auntie Wairama squeezed her hand proudly. Musa, from the back of the room, gave a small nod, knowing the risk he took had saved an entire company. The moment Zawadi stepped out of the courthouse, the crowd waiting outside erupted. Reporters shoved microphones toward her, influencers went live on the spot, and social media lit up within minutes. Hashtags like #Lioness of Nairobi, #ZawadiWin, and #Justice for Women Entrepreneurs shot across Kenya and beyond. People praised her courage. Customers rushed to support her business. Orders tripled by the end of the day. Women shared her story as inspiration. Even big brands reached out wanting partnerships. Zawadi looked at the cheering crowd and felt something powerful rising inside her. Not revenge, not anger, but victory. She had lost everything, and still stood back up. She had been betrayed, yet she fought with dignity. She had been pushed out of her own empire, and now she was walking back into it stronger than ever. Kamau had tried to destroy her. Instead, he made her unstoppable. Months after the courtroom victory, Zawadi's life had transformed in ways she never imagined. Zawadi culture was not just back in her hands, it was thriving more than ever. She had opened new stores in Mombasa and Kisumu, and international buyers from Lagos, London, and Dubai were reaching out to collaborate. The woman who once sold fabrics from a small wooden stall was now building a global fashion brand that celebrated African culture proudly. But success wasn't just about money or fame for Zawadi anymore. She remembered the betrayal, the pain, the sleepless nights, and she refused to let anyone else feel powerless like she had. That's why she started a mentorship program for African women entrepreneurs, sharing her story, her strategies, and her courage. She wanted women to know that ambition was not something to hide, that strength was not something to apologize for. Her office became a hub of empowerment, filled with young women taking notes, asking questions, and dreaming bigger than they ever dared. Every morning, Zawadi would walk into her new Nairobi headquarters, breathe in the city's energy, and feel a quiet pride. One evening, she stepped onto the balcony, overlooking the skyline lit by thousands of twinkling lights. The wind lifted her hair, and for a moment she closed her eyes, thinking about the journey, from small stalls to betrayal to triumph. She opened her eyes, looked out at the city she had fought to conquer, and said softly but firmly, "A woman's strength is not a threat. It's a foundation, and mine will never be stolen again." In that moment, Zawadi wasn't just a businesswoman. She was a symbol, a lioness who had faced deceit, heartbreak, and injustice, and emerged not just victorious, but unstoppable. Her story would inspire generations, proving that courage, integrity, and resilience could rewrite destiny. And she knew deep down that nothing, not even the people who once tried to break her, could ever take her power away again.